Please give a warm welcome to what is sure to be an inspiring and thoughtful speech, Anna Rose.
Just to give you an overview of what I'll talk about today, I want to share a bit about my story and some of the things that I've learned along the way that I hope will help you in your own work. I'll talk a little bit about leadership and some of the common challenges that we face as young professionals trying to create change in our workplaces and in our world. But getting back to the cute puppy, this is Chloe. Chloe was a dog that I used to walk for my elderly neighbour who wasn't able to do household and dog-related tasks anymore. And so I used to walk her after school when I was about 13, and Chloe was a very energetic puppy, so she used to drag me down to the beach in Newcastle. So I was spending a lot of time down there, and that's what led me to take up surfing. So my best friend and I went down to the markets, got second-hand surfboards, tried to teach ourselves how to surf, eventually kind of succeeded. And it was one of those mornings that we were out there before school surfing and looking out at the horizon that I started to connect some dots in my head about what was going on in my life and in the world. In the summer of, I think it was between year 7 and year 8, I was spending a lot of time on my grandparents' farm in northwestern New South Wales in Gunnedah. And you probably remember that there was a really severe drought happening at that time. And it was really heartbreaking for me to see this farm, which my mum had grown up on, my grandparents were still farming. It was such an important part of our family to see the crops that should have been harvested die from lack of water, to see the cattle having to be firstly moved from feeding stock to being hand-fed and then eventually sold off to other farms because there was just not enough food, enough water for them to survive. And to go through that as a family, eventually that farm ended up being sold, was something that really deeply affected me and many, many young people who have spent time or come from regional and rural areas feel the same way. And so I was out on the beach, out behind the beach surfing one morning, and I started to look behind me at this beautiful sunset, beautiful sunrise, and it was stunning, but in between me and the sunrise there were about 30 coal ships on the horizon. Newcastle's the world's biggest coal export port. And I'd been starting to read and starting to learn about sustainability, and in school I remember learning about, as it was called back then, the greenhouse effect, as we know now, climate change. And I started to connect those dots between what was happening to my grandparents' farm and the coal that we were exporting from Newcastle and digging up from the Hunter Valley. So that made me think, well, I have to try and do something about this sustainability issue. And so I set up a group at my high school and lured my friends to come along with the promise of free Tim Tams. Always a very successful tactic. And we decided we'd make our school the most sustainable school in Newcastle. We set up recycling systems. This is me as a 14-year-old looking incredibly daggy. And we set up composting and we planted all these native trees in our school. And then we decided to take on state government. And this was back when Bob Carr was Premier. He had promised to protect an area just north of our school, to turn it into a national park, years and years before, but he'd never delivered on his promise. So this area was under threat from sand mining, from BHP. Beautiful ecosystem, Stockton Bight, similar to that of Fraser Island before it was mined. So my high school group joined with the traditional owners and with this group of grumpy old residents, grumpy old men who didn't want to see mining near their houses, as well as with some environmental groups. And I was 14 when we started that campaign, and by the time I had turned 16, we'd won. The area had been declared a protected area under the management of the traditional owners, and that particular mine had been stopped. And that taught me at a very young age that in Australia, change doesn't have to come from the top down. It can come from the bottom up. It can come from high school students. It can come from traditional owners. It can come from a group of grumpy old men who'd never done a campaign before but just didn't want to see that mine ruin their area. And it also taught me that you don't have to be in any particular kind of position to exercise leadership, to make change. You don't have to wait until you're the head of a department, or until you're a minister, or until you're prime minister. You can start making change wherever you are, and that there's no one particular type of person who can be effective at making change. It takes all different types of people. Those who say it can't be done should get out of the way of those already doing it. And I think there's something in that for the work that you do, because often you'll be told that the leadership work or the problem you've identified or the opportunity you've identified or the new idea that you've had might be too hard. It might be too difficult, so don't try it. Someone tried that 20 years ago and it didn't work, so why would you try now? But you can always find an example somewhere in the world, if not in Australia, of something that is working. So you've had an idea, you find an element of it that is working somewhere in the world, and you point to that and you say, well, this is how we could scale it up. One thing I learned, though, about working with all of these thousands of young people throughout AYCC was that there are many different styles of leadership required to make progress on an issue. And we have an exercise that I find can be useful in helping you identify what kind of leadership style is most suited to you. And we call it bear, eagle, deer, and what's the other animal? Buffalo. Buffalo, I should remember that one. So I'll just briefly describe them and think about which one you fit into. So the eagle is the visionary. They're the people who have the big ideas. They're the ones asking, what's this going to look like in 20 years, in 50 years' time? I'm sure there are a lot of eagles out there. Then there's the buffaloes, who are the people who drive things forward. They're really action-oriented, very outcome-oriented. They like delegating to other people and making sure the project is happening as fast as it can. Then you have deers, and deers are the people, and I'm sure there are a lot in the public service as well, who are really, really lovely people focused on relationships, focusing on the human side of things. So they're developing a service program and they're saying, well, what's actually the impact on people? How's this going to affect people in the community? And they're very focused on making sure that at the end of the day, people are being served properly. And then you have bears. And bears are very logical, very analytical, very focused on the details. They're the ones, when you bring up an idea, they'll say, but hang on, what about this? Is this the right way to go? They're picking the flaws, they're finding the things that may not work, and they're very important as well. So have a think about which one you are, and maybe afterwards at your table you can share, because often you'll find unexpected allies in animal groups that you never knew your friend was. But no matter what your leadership style is, you have many things in common as public servants. And in preparation for today, I asked a few of my colleagues and a few of my friends and family, probably surveyed about 50 people, what is your impression of professional public servants, particularly young professionals? When you think of them, what do you think of? I had no idea what they'd come back with, but this is what they said. They said things like, the buck stops with them. They're responsible for both the bigger picture and the smaller detail. They're very responsible. They value service. They're the guardians of our communities. They're steadfast, loyal, and reliable. They have perseverance and fortitude, even under really difficult circumstances where they have people trying to tell them what to do and what to think. The word discernment came up a lot. Someone said, my friend Lily said, they know their true values and they know what really matters, and they're able to see beyond the sound bites and the headlines that politicians have to be aware of. So it's quite complimentary. And I think another thing that came up is that public servants are problem solvers. So you are presented with every day so many different problems, and you're probably the kind of people to come to a breakfast this early in the morning to think about these issues. You're probably the kind of people who are thinking about problems before they've even been presented to you. And you're the kind of people who want to make a difference on those problems. And I'm sure that in your work you have recognised that there are two different types of problems that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis. One is technical. So you might go to the doctor and you've broken your wrist, the problem is known, the doctor knows how to fix it, the time frame is known. So the problem is known, the solution is known, it's not that difficult. And then there's adaptive challenges. And this is where all of your creativity and all of your brilliance needs to come to the fore. Adaptive challenges is where the problem may not be known and the solution may not be known. And to get to the solution, something has to change, something has to shift, and there needs to be some kind of loss in order to move forward. So you might go to the doctor complaining of headaches and not being able to sleep, and obviously it's something to do with stress and overwork. And the doctor says you need to eat healthier, you need to exercise, but we're still not sure if this will really fix it, but give it a go. And this involves, for the person who went to the doctor, a kind of loss, because they're being asked to eat foods that don't taste as good as what they used to. They're being asked to give up some of their sleep to go and exercise to improve their health. And if they do accept those recommendations, it's going to be a big change for them. Broadening that analogy out to the challenges that we're facing in the public service, in our communities, in this state, in Australia. Adaptive leadership in our context is getting people to face the reality of what's really going on, and if required, being able to change values, change habits, direct people through that period of loss and change in order to deal with the real threat or the real opportunity that we perceive to be underlying. And for you guys as young professionals, it's interesting and really important to note that the higher up in the chain, in the hierarchy that you are, the less leeway you will have to exercise that kind of adaptive leadership, because people in positions of authority are expected by the public, by everyone, to provide very stable protection, direction, order. And the kind of adaptive leadership, the kind of work that you can do as young professionals in identifying the real problems and the real opportunities, will threaten the status quo, will threaten this sense of protection and direction and order. And you won't always be liked for it. So you have an opportunity to do your work differently and make sure that you support each other in it. I know that you're all aware of the urgent challenges that our communities face, that our world faces, and sometimes speaking out can be hard. We need a new kind of leadership, and there's a poem that I love about finding and using your voice, even in the space of great difficulty. It says, "And when we speak, we are afraid that our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive." And to conclude, the change of government in New South Wales, it's an opportunity for all of you to try new things, to think differently, to exercise adaptive leadership, and to bring all of the amazing, exciting ideas that you have at 3 a.m. or that you have in the shower or that you have walking your dogs, to bring them into the work that you do. You'll be outside your comfort zone as within any change. You'll be in what we call the learning zone. But as every explorer knows, one doesn't discover new lands without losing sight of the shore for some time. So it's okay to lose sight of the shore. Finally, to conclude, I just want to remind you that leadership and exercising leadership can begin in the strangest of places, whether it be walking a dog along the beach or somewhere else. So for you today, I hope that this journey begins or continues, as I'm sure it will be for all of you, continues when you walk back into your offices this morning. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of this amazing breakfast. Thank you.